I'm Ted Lau. This week, Andrew Lau, co-founder and CEO of Jellyfish, which enables leaders to measure, improve, and communicate the investment they're making in their engineering teams. Jellyfish was just named to the Forbes Next Billion-Dollar Startups of 2023 list. In this episode, Andrew breaks down how his team noticed the growing investment companies made in engineering and helped them organize how they work, the way Salesforce helped organize how sales teams work. Let's get into it.
It's easy to think that today all businesses understand sales. I don't think that was always true. I think in the late 90s, sales was also a black art. And you'd say like, hey, I hope and wish these guys and gals are going to close the quarter. They say, trust me, we're going to make $1 million. It'll be great. And then ostensibly they'd miss and it'd be really hard. And then you kind of look at Salesforce, what shows up in 2004, probably on the back of Siebel. At the time, not everybody was ready to go use it. By the time you get to 2010 or 2011, like every VC is blogging about CAC and LTV. Every business now understands call to close ratios, the pipeline ratios, sales cycles, like how long they take. They understand where leads are broken, different segments and all of these things. So the nature now is that companies understand how the sales machinery works. Because of that, are willing to actually push more money into it because they can confidently understand where the machinery is stuck, right? And so I actually think Salesforce helped to create that, or it benefited from it, maybe symbiotic. And so we look at actually software engineering. I would argue that software engineering today is what sales was arguably like in 2004 in the sense that businesses don't understand how to engage with it. And so I think part of the journey that we play in there is, can we do what Salesforce did for sales? Can we both build a platform to help people understand how the team is actually doing for the purpose of actually building confidence and bidirectional communication at the net goal of actually helping companies win more, right?
And then, as I understand, you conducted some 50, 60 interviews to validate the idea before you set out to build it.
Amongst the three of us, we had to go interview people and VP, CTOs and stuff like that. We interviewed 50 something of them. And by the time we actually got to maybe like 3 or 4 in, I was like, wow, this is not unique pain that I faced. It turns out everybody has this challenge when you're leading big engineering teams around how the business doesn't understand. It's very hard to communicate the two sides of it. And the team doesn't understand the business. It's very hard to translate the other direction too. Viscerally see the pain and yearning for a solution in that space. That's what got me actually really engaged. And so yes, we then did the other 40 or something interviews on that stuff to build further conviction. But yeah, we did a lot of work early on to really, make sure there's a real thing here for us to go do.
Tell me about the journey from $0 to first million in revenue.
Let's go actually not zero, but even -0. Let's go all the way back, right? Me, Dave, and Phil have actually known each other now for 24 years now. These guys hired me in 1999 for another company. I joined them at this company at 8 people, and I got to see it go to 550. We ended up selling it to Oracle for over $1 billion. It was an incredible journey. It gave me the startup bug. One of the takeaways coming out of that was how much I valued working with people, being on the journey together with a crew. The likeliness of us crossing paths, being able to work with people you really want from 20 years ago is very unlikely. Because life happens. We go in different geographies, life stages happen, people go into different things, tap out of the game. But we found ourselves available again in 2016. We acknowledged the scarcity or the rarity of that and said, hey, let's try doing something together. I remember sitting in a restaurant here in downtown Boston, a sushi bar here. We sat there in a proverbial napkin or a Mac Notes, and we wrote down a bunch of stuff that we wanted to make out of this whole space and what kind of company we want to build. Half of it actually was about culture and people, but then we also wrote a bunch of stuff around the business, right? And the business was about, B2B, innovation-centric, new markets, not old. And one of the words I remember was like being able to touch a lot of people, or in VC speak, big TAM. These were all criteria that we used to sift through the concepts of things that we actually wanted to do. Now, the Jellyfish idea itself was born out of a funny conversation where I think Phil goes, well, which one of us is going to do the engineering thing this time? And I think Dave and I kind of put our nose in our finger, like, not me. I forget which one of us said it. We're like, the job is effing hard. People are always yelling at you because they don't understand the business, and the business understand engineers understand business. And when you're running a big engineering team, the reality is you actually grab both sides and say, trust me. That's all they do is directly yelling at you, right? And so in that moment, I think Phil goes like, "Hey, why hasn't anyone done this? Like, what Salesforce did for sales for engineering?" So he rhetorically posed that question to answer why there's no data thing. And that became the kernel of the germ that became Jellyfish. So anyways, that's the before zero question.
How long did it take you to build the product? When did you go to
Yeah.
market? And what were the key challenges then?
We worked on the product sans revenue for a couple of years. In the early aughts, you needed to raise big numbers because it took a lot of money to build things. And the good part of the world today is you can build things in an incremental fashion that's a little faster. But early odds, you still had to raise it. We were scared of digging in and building things for a few years, only to find no one caring. So we tried to flip the script a little bit. If you go back to that late 90s, early 2000s, people used to build consulting businesses and then eventually turn those into product businesses. And it can be a very capital efficient way to build a business. And because in doing so, you figure out what people really care about. Part of it is learning which contracts to take on, which ones not to, because you need to have a roadmap or you have the desire of where you want to go, and you can choose your business to overlay into that accordingly or not. So we took inspiration from that motion, and we luckily had actually raised some seed capital. So we weren't running services for the sake of making money. In fact, we weren't really taking revenue. We actually assumed that while we knew what problem we wanted to solve, we didn't know how to solve it. And so instead, we called those same interviewees back and we said, hey, can we work with you to solve this problem space? We'll do things by hand. We'll do your board decks for you. We'll do your spreadsheets. We'll do whatever you need, as long as we can work with you and have access to your raw data. We spent that first couple of years bringing in concepts like where you'd meet one VPE or CTO who does something really great. And like, hey, would you want that automated? Because that person did it by hand. And the interesting part is I think a lot of heads of engineering don't share a lot of techniques. And so you'd hear a cool technique from somebody and you try to say, can we automate it for the next guy or gal? We meet the next guy or gal and say like, hey, does that work for you? And they would say yes or no. And so we kind of went through this motion with, over that year and a half, two, kind of working with different kind of prospects and customers to make sure we had something that people cared about before we went to market on that space. That was really the product part of it. And then probably the year after that, we then kind of pushed to kind of more founder selling. Probably the first $500,000 of business was all founder sold. I think that founder selling is an important part to actually figure out, can you prove this is a thing that people want? That was really the kind of first couple of years journey there for us around getting that thing kind of out of the garage as a real thing.
Selling is an important part of product development. Here's Y Combinator partner and former head of growth at Airbnb, Gustav Alströmer, explaining why.
Founders should learn how to do sales. You should learn how to do sales because you need to learn to know your customer. Talking to customers and sales are effectively different sides of the same coin, and the same reasons founders can't understand what to build, they don't understand what the problem is, you don't know how to sell unless you know your customers. 2, learning how to do sales actually gives you full control of your destiny as a startup. Just like you can't outsource engineering, sales has to be part of the DNA of the founders. Sometimes you just have to learn it. As a result, you should not hire a sales team until you know how to do sales yourself. Only then will you know what good looks like. You also can't do sales if the product is bad, and you won't know if the product is bad unless you've had some effort in trying to sell it first. As you're running the demo, your goal is to close your first customers. You want to ask a lot of questions up front in the demos, and it's the founders who should do the demos because you are the one knowing the product and you know the customer pain points.
You used the founder-led sales, the first 500K or so.
Yeah.
What changed after that?
So along the way, we had an advisor that pushed us to bring in a couple of BDRs, which actually really helpful because I think it's important to get repetitions outside of your network on that stuff. And I think that actually during that time frame, we actually started doing that. And through those sales, we built conviction around what price point we should be selling at. And I think, I think a lot of go-to-market motions, yes, the market will tell you, but you also have to pick and choose with some direction, just like product roadmap, right? So product roadmap, early on, you don't know what it should be, but you have choices along the way to kind of nudge it. And the market will push you back, but you can kind of send it in a direction you want to. And the same goes to go-to-market, right? Some people thought we should be selling seven-figure deals. And we felt that kind of mid-market 5 or low six-figure was a price point that we wanted to play. We had to prove it with some founder selling to see if that's true or not. And having that kind of business development team kind of helped us give repetitions to figure out where the market was and those things. Once we started finding that conviction, that helped us figure out like, hey, who are the first sellers we want to bring on, and thusly the sales leadership that actually can scale this. And so it was about getting our first seller in the door, getting the second seller in the door, and then getting our head of sales and kind of rolling that out. And once you start having a beat of the motion, you can start repeating it. I don't want to use the word repeatable like it was magic, but you can actually start figuring out like, hey, who's actually in this profile? Who can we actually get in this? Like, have they sold in a 5-6 figure thing? Have they sold to a technical audience? Can they actually kind of repeat or expand what we've been doing? Once you know that, you can talk about marketing different from PLG self-service marketing. Those are really divergent marketing tactics. Understanding those things, I think, are really important along the journey, and that helped us unlock it.
Deciding whether you sell into small or medium businesses, the mid-market, or enterprise has huge implications on how you should set up your company. What channels you use? Will you have BDRs? How long is the sales cycle? How much you can charge? And so on. Jellyfish decided to go after the mid-market companies. Here's Vanta's Chief Revenue Officer Stevie Case talking about the mid-market.
Truth is that, mid-market is that middle ground. What is it? Every company may define it differently. Some define it by headcount of the company they're selling to. Some define it by revenue. These may not apply in your business. And typically what companies do is define the mid-market as that between the SMB space, the small, medium business space, and the enterprise. And typically those lines get set on either boundary based on the buying behavior of who you're selling to. So if you're selling into companies and their buying behavior changes around 50 employees, you may draw the line there. If it changes around 5,000 employees, you may draw the upper bound there. This can be very specific to your business. And really, why would you care? Why would you want to sell into this middle ground? Well, it's particularly relevant right now in the economic climate we're in. The unit economics in the mid-market can be much more attractive than in SMB. These are folks that have money, they have budget, they're typically growing, there's a lot good happening here. These companies are also usually more stable than an SMB profile, but they also move fast, unlike an enterprise. You can run into scenarios in the mid-market where you've got a single decision maker who will make a buying decision for millions of dollars in a very quick time frame that you won't see in the enterprise. So it's worthwhile to chase this segment, particularly at a time like this.
I read that in 2020 you quintupled your revenue, and the year after you tripled it. What do you attribute the growth to?
I think I always talk about luck. I've learned that luck is actually a code word for timing. Timing is not a thing you can control. I go back and say, what the hell happened? Because it's not like we changed our positioning. It's not like we changed our product, but that activation actually happened. And then, look, none of us would ever wish a pandemic, right? I mean, it's insane. But one byproduct of it is like everyone suddenly went hybrid, and everybody's asking, hey, is this team effective in this medium? Is this getting worse? Is it getting better? I don't have any understanding of this. So that desire to answer that question suddenly brought attention and relevance to what we do. Then there's a second way the world moves towards efficiency too, is understanding if we got scarce resources, are we all pointed in the same direction in the right way? Who needs help along the way? Those are vectors that I think have been tactically helpful in the last couple of years. You could probably take our pitch deck from 17 and actually use it today. It was 3 slides long. It's still relevant today, and that part of it I'm actually proud of, because I actually think the macro statement, the why now we have in that deck, still holds today. Why now is just that like software is expensive. It's 40% of OpEx. It's the most strategic department. It's making the things that we sell. It's deeply important, and structurally it hasn't changed. In fact, that's compounded. It's not like we're smarter or cooler than the last guy or gal who did this. Timing is such a big part. Are we Chewy or Pets.com? It's all relative to what decade you're in. And so you have to ask yourself, why now? The why now that we have in there is one of technical substrates, the possibility, which is I think, all teams now in engineering are doing some form of agile, whether it's Scrum, Kanban, Safe, whatever your flavor. And they're all using digital tools for this. So they're using, GitHub type things, Jira type things. And so it's all in the cloud. So that sets the stage that you can do these things. But the most important part is that, frankly, engineering has gotten expensive. You could argue this is actually a hard, challenging and problem to figure out how we can tie what engineering does to the business. It's a hard problem, right? We figured it for sales, we figured it out for marketing, figured it out for success. This is the hard department here. But unlike 20 years ago, it was just me and a couple nerds and a slice of pizza in the corner. It's like 40% of teams now. It's like really big. So It's no longer an elective choice. And so I think that is actually the structural force.
So today, engineering management platform is a fast-growing category. Did it exist when you got started? Did you play a role in creating the category?
It's always easier said post facto. I don't think we're done. I would say that we definitely spent a lot of time researching people that came 10, 15 years before us, people that had some nascent progress in that space. Maybe we've made a dent in the baseball game analogy. I bet you're actually in inning 3 in the baseball game. Why do I say this, right? If you look at late market environments, like my inning 8 or 9 in my analogy, all the companies actually have the same product, different colors, and different price sheets. If you were to draw a box around what represents competition and whoever is looking at that, you look at each of the things, everyone's actually offering different things. We're still attacking the world differently. So I think it's still an evolving market. When you get to inning 7 or inning 6, there's a pre-carved line item and that stuff. We're not there yet, right? The category definitely wasn't formed when we started. I don't think it's formed today. We still probably have another 5-year journey before we get to those later innings.
Would it be accurate to say that your growth has come from the growth of the category, the increased demand for the category?
It's awareness or problem space creation. It's not like suddenly more engineers showed up in the world. I think our growth is the awareness and relevance of what we do. People are like, oh, that is a problem I face. And it definitely hasn't been tackled this way before. And I think those activations, those eye openings have been the reasons of the TAM creation, not even TAM expansion, it's TAM creation in this space.
Noticing what new tech enables is critical in business. Here's Ray Kurzweil, who founded Kurzweil Computer Products and led the development of the first OmniFont optical character recognition system, talking about timing with Lex Friedman.
How much of a good idea is about timing? How much is it about your genius versus that its time has come?
Timing's very important. I mean, I did OCR in the 1970s because OCR doesn't require a lot of computation.
Optical character recognition.
Yeah, so we were able to do that in the 70s, and I waited till the 80s to address speech recognition, since that requires more computation.
So you were thinking through timing when you're developing those things.
Yeah.
How much deliberate category marketing are you guys doing?
I think you have to do a little both, right? I think there's literal demand gen that can be very quantified in pipeline. It's important for people to hear the story. I mean, I generally will, I think we do lots of events and speaking engagement where we don't even have to say our name. I think in a category creation environment, it's more important for us to be talking about the challenges of leading engineering teams at scale than it is even to talk about Jellyfish helping there, because there's so much stuff that has to happen here. I'll give you an analogy. Like, you look at any company that you meet today, if you could pick up their board slides, you could probably guess what's actually in the sales and marketing deck, right? You understand what the metrics are in that space. We've all figured it out. Like, maybe 20 years ago, it was not clear. I think engineering right now is still very nascent. For most companies, you get to the engineering part, there's not a lot of meat there. We're happy to talk about what we're seeing as, good ways to engage with your board or to engage with other operational leaders, or how to actually connect with the engineers who are doing, regardless of using Jellyfish. Even the outcome is do it by hand. Because I think the existence of those things, all roads will come back to essentially the awareness of what needs to be done here. That this is a thing that has to evolve in this industry. And yeah, we happen to be there. We're willing to do that stuff because it does move the needle around the conversation of what needs to happen, regardless of our name is attached to it or not.
You've said that a company should address the problems of tomorrow, not today. How is that impacting the way you run the business?
The reality is, whether you're building a new go-to-market motion, training a new seller, putting a marketing campaign together, developing some product, it's just going to take clock time. If you're trying to play for the needs today, it's unrealistic to actually make a dent unless you really think you can hit it in rapid fashion. So I think you have to acknowledge those things take time. You have to ask yourself, well, is this problem still relevant then? And you got to play into the timeline on that part of it. It's easy to have a cajillion ideas all the time. And a lot of panic too, because you're seeing a lot of noise out there.
You said the category is still nascent. There are also some solid competitors in the space. Your Linear B, Swarmy, Pluralsight, and so on. Are you paying attention to what the competition is doing? And are you deliberately building some moats for the future?
In general, the large majority of our deals are still non-competitive. And again, that really just says it's a growing market. When you get to late markets, it's dogfights and everybody's fighting over every deal. And it goes to my earlier point around everyone's offerings are different right now. So I think actually that, so on a given day, do I worry about anybody individually? No, because I think companies at our stage, generally speaking, all, broad speaking startups, like are really the byproduct of the customers you choose to service, what they ask of you, where you win, where you fail in these things. And you have to decide as a founder and executive whether you're going to listen to them or not. You can suss out the problem space in there. But that doesn't mean you necessarily want to tackle that problem. You have to pick and choose which problems you want to solve for. And I think in doing that, that drives the company. It's your choice of listening to which pains that there are that will drive and dictate the evolution of the company. And in competitors, they may be reacting to other conversations, or they may be reacting to what you've said. If you listen too hard to what they're doing, you may be chasing your own tail. There are cases where you do need, I think it's important to watch things like where you're competitive and where you're not, because it might teach you around evolution of the market and what's happening in that space. Are there things that are causing your customers or prospects to act differently along the way? I think it's important to listen to your customers, to your prospects, more than any specific competitor.
When you look back at the last 6 years of growing Jellyfish, what 3 pieces of advice would you have for fellow B2B SaaS founders?
Timing is everything. And I was actually with a VC friend, and he was making fun of me. He's like, well, this is exactly what an operator would say. Timing is everything. Timing cum markets is everything. Because from a VC perspective, we would say people are everything. And I think I know why. It's because as operators, we have the choice, timing comes along us or not. And so we can't control that part of it, right? As a VC, they can control timing because they can choose to invest in a point in time in an industry, in a market or not. So that the axis for them is people, right? And so I actually think it is the same conversation. People and timing are the two necessary combinations that has to happen. It just depends whose lens it. So from our SaaS founder perspective, I think timing's everything. Being critical to ask yourself why now, and knowing is this the time to enter the market, or to think about ways to elongate time so you can see a longer time horizon. Number 2 is I think marketing matters, and I think it's easy for product engineering folks to undervalue marketing. I think broad sense marketing gives you the at-bats, and product gives you the endurance here. And I think it's easy as product engineering to just assume that you make perfect stuff and things just happen. Well, I think, the marketing and sales activities gives you the at-bats to try to iterate, to help you figure out if it actually works there. So I think it's important to actually go, to fund that appropriately at different times, whether it be creating a blogging voice or investing at the right time on the stuff, that do it earlier than you think you should on that stuff. And then third advice here is, I think, is remaining patient, right? And I think there's, I think we're all, all of us type A kind of founder type people, we're all itchy. We're all paranoid, and it's a reminder how things take time that's out of your control. Plenty of startups fail, and often it's not because they did a bad job. It's just that timing and patience. And I guess it's around some self-awareness to that part of it. And you shouldn't be reading media all days and feel like, why aren't I there? It's really about yourself, your team, your co-founders, your customers, and that journey more than it is any other externalized factor.
So how did Jellyfish win? First, they noticed a growing trend.
Frankly, engineering has gotten expensive. You could argue this is actually a hard, challenging problem to figure out how we can tie what engineering does to the business.
Next, they studied their customers' need by doing hard consulting work.
Do your spreadsheets, we'll do whatever you need.
Finally, they got the timing right. The category they are in is growing fast and speeds up their growth as well.
I think timing's everything, and I think being really critical to ask yourself why now, and knowing is this the time to enter the market, or to think about ways to elongate time so you can see a longer time horizon.
That's how you win. I'm Pep Lau. For more tips on how to win, follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Thanks for listening.